Pine Tree 2. All right. Do you know what Pine Tree 2 means? What's the 2?
It's the group we play in.
Have you ever heard of Pine Tree 1?
No.
Why do they call this Pine Tree 2? Week 2?
Yeah. Do you know where Pine Tree 1 was held? Do you know who ran it?
Curry?
Huh?
Curry?
Steph Curry?
Yeah.
No?
I'm honored to give this to a camp like Camp Up here. I should be home sleeping with my wife and hugging my kids, right? And we're almost in Waterville, Maine. You gotta be crazy.
This is Jason Jabar. I'm here with my co-host, TJ Maines. We're at the Jabar Liberty Studios here in Waterville. And we're here to talk about the Pine Tree basketball camp with the founders, owners, operators, Coach Dick Whitmore and Dick Meader, who are online with us. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah, talking a little Pine Tree basketball that was important to so many of us.
Yeah, it's where, we grew up there. I started going when I was 5 or 6 years old, with my dad, and I've spent every summer of my life from 1979 to 2010 or 11 when you got done. And there's a lot of us like that. I spent a lot of time there at camp, loved it, and it was a really formative part for us growing up. How did it get started? What's the genesis for Pine Tree?
Do you want me to go with that, Whit, or do you?
Yes, absolutely, Dick.
We heard that you brought him into this whole thing, Coach Meader, and that
We heard you were the mastermind.
you felt bad for him and brought him in. Is that true?
That's it.
It wasn't being a mastermind, being very bright with it, though.
So what year is Pine Tree's first year?
74?
Yeah, I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's at Thomas College.
Yes.
Was that boys and girls or just boys?
First year, I think may have been boys, Whit, or did we?
No, boys and girls. We had at
Okay.
least 1 week of girls.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 1974, Coach Meader, what are you doing at that time? Are you the Thomas men's
Yes,
basketball coach?
I'm Thomas, the basketball coach.
And
And
how old are you?
Oh, 25, 26.
And Coach Witt, what are you doing at that point?
I was 31 and I was in my fourth year at Colby.
Okay. So 1974, and how many years are you at Thomas before it switches over to Colby?
I don't know the exact years, it would be 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. 81, 82, somewhere in that
And
range.
So what precipitated the switch?
Well, probably the most important thing was size, and the other thing was the facilities at Colby. At the end, while we were at Thomas, we were doing a couple weeks at Thomas, a couple weeks at Colby. Between weeks, we would go up to Colby and get as many portable beds as we could find. And we had rooms of 3, 4 in the small dorm rooms at Thomas. And I picture a cartoon of kids just hanging out window type thing. So.
Yeah, we literally had to move beds between Thomas and Colby several times in the period where we had Summit Thomas and Summit Colby. And there were a couple of trips down Kennedy Drive where I know my ass was half out the truck trying to hold the mattresses down.
We would we'd borrow Thomas's truck, and then east-west, we would be behind them, and by we'd hand them out the fire escape.
Yep.
Down over with 3 floors down to the bottom, and fill up the truck. And my lasting memory on that was we would be driving out and the weight had shifted and there was smoke coming from the tires because all the weight was over a tire and it was forcing a bolt to the truck that was making a groove in the tire. And we had mattresses on top, And Whit and Eddie McClone were lying on the top of the mattresses
Yes.
going down Kennedy to hold the mattresses on.
That sounds safe.
Oh, it's AAA approved. Yeah.
That's great. Now, how about the number of kids at the camp when you first started out? How many kids were there the first few summers at camp?
Oh, well,
We had pretty good numbers right away.
yeah.
Like 300 or so, 300?
You
Yeah,
only get
that would be fair.
Yeah, what happened is we get to the limit at Thomas. Dick knows more about the details that way, but there were only a certain amount we could take at Thomas.
Right.
And then we used to, use the bus, and we used to do some at Mount Mercy and some at
Temple.
the Temple Academy. Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Kennebec Church had out on the Marston's Road.
yeah, that's right. And it just became, it became very difficult, to be able to keep everything together. And Colby was for a long time fought having a whole lot of summer programs for high school kids. And when they relented, they just, put us in a situation where it made most sense to bring it all up to Colby. And,
Right.
and that just eased the whole, the whole organizational aspect of it. Because I remember painting courts down at Thomas, and just
Yep.
the whole mechanics of everything was self-initiated by us.
Well, I think so anybody who's gone to Thomas now, you see all these buildings, but when you were there, it was 3 buildings, and you had all the courts were all there to the left of the gym, all
Correct.
outdoor courts.
Outdoor
and-
courts, right?
Yeah, I mean, you had the 2 courts in the big gym, and then everything else was outside.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Did you have girls' weeks at Thomas, or was it all?
yeah.
all- You had both. So by the time it was in its heyday, you had 3 boys' weeks and 3 girls' weeks at Colby. Was it that way at Thomas?
I think
2
3
girls.
and 2, Jason.
Yeah.
3 and 2.
Yeah.
Was it that way at Thomas, or did it grow into that?
Yes.
At some
Grew
point,
it-
it was
grew
2
into
and
that.
4 also.
Yeah, there were 4.
4 boys' weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the numbers being either I was, my freshman or sophomore year in high school, there being 500-600 kids. And then when I was in college in the early 90s and working, there would be 600 kids there. And the college counselors were all on the backside of campus because there was no place for people to stay. Now, those numbers about right? Like on the high weeks, you might have 600 in August.
There was one week, I think, we registered 608 and
Wow.
590 something came. But at Thomas, we were running into the same problem, and as was said, that the numbers and then the facilities. But at Thomas, I can remember C11
Yeah.
had a room of 7 people: Al Venziano, Eddie McClone, Charlie Ryan.
So that's like the who's who of Thomas basketball right there, Coach.
Yeah, and there were 7 mattresses, and they didn't have a specific mattress. Who came in first to the far end took the one on the end, and the next one, and so forth. So they didn't have to crawl over each other to get in that specific bed. But I
Well,
slept one week in the lobby because we had the mattress.
Wow.
House.
You just put a mattress in the lobby.
Oh, no, just slept on this couch.
Yeah.
no kidding.
Did you guys have card games when you were at Thomas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were, occasionally, yeah.
So, before, Coach, just to go back, Coach Malone came in early on as one of the partners. Now, how did that work out? And he must have brought a lot of that influx of the New York City kids. Then ended
all
up
of it.
coming, all of it.
Yeah, all of it.
So was he really important guy early on for you guys?
From that perspective, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be the ability to bring some outside talent to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he brought a lot of really good players.
Yeah.
So how did that connection start? Because I do remember when I was really young, you had the whole Power Memorial connection and then the Christ the King connection. Was that all with Brendan Malone? Is that how
He was the power coach.
that started?
Yeah, and he had been involved with Dick Hunt, if not the first year, at least the second year that I recall. So.
And so how many of those kids from the city would come up to Pine Tree basketball camp in the summer? Would it just be 1 week, or would it be an influx all summer?
No, they would usually stay 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I know we used to have
Last
more
two.
a cook up between weeks, because we used to go Sunday to Saturday back then, remember? So
Wow.
Oh, you went Sunday to Saturday, and about how many kids would you get in for those 2 weeks from, say, Power Memorial or Christ the King or
Archbishop Malloy.
it would be 15 to 20.
Now, Coach Witt, did you ever get any New York City kids? Were any of them able to kind of be Colby guys? Like I know Coach Meader was able to get Charlie, who's arguably the greatest player ever at Thomas, and Eddie McGlone and others.
Yeah, we tried T, but when you got to that next level, there was a lot of scholarship involved. Basketball
Right.
scholarships involved. And Dick, remember Sean Canning? I know we had, we had him until the last thing, and he was one of the top 3 or 4 players in St. Anselm's history now. But that part was tough, T.
Yeah. Now, Coach, how about for you? What was it like having Charlie Ryan and Eddie and those guys?
Well, they certainly helped develop our program. But certainly a challenge.
Did
But
Charlie-
it was through camp.
when you say a challenge, how so? What kind of challenges?
No, it's just, the nature of it. I remember Charlie, those are the days also People's Express played a big part of our camp in its own way, because it was like $29 from Portland to New York City. I remember going to pick up Charlie, and he had a duffel bag. That's everything he owned. And he didn't, no alarm clock for classes. And he thought because we were at Thomas that he got woken up every morning of the comm, since during the summer that they would be doing it during the fall.
Yeah.
So he missed a class or two then? Safe to say?
Yeah, it probably did.
There are some Pine Tree stories about him needing to be woken up as when he was a coach too back in the day. Maybe missing an alarm clock. So that was a theme that continued. And did you have any personal involvement in the wake up situations?
Well,
Swisher was the big wake up guy.
yes, right.
Swish.
Back in that room of 7, he would crawl over people to get to Phil's ear and with the intercom.
Oh, that's right too.
Announce that.
It's good timing because we just happened to be joined by Phil St. Onge. For those who don't know Phil, he was a fixture at Pine Tree. When did Phil come on board as one of the Pine Tree employees?
It's kind of a strange.
Is he like a stray dog that you kind of just pulled in?
I remember, you know this exact story, but his father wanted to get rid of him for a few weeks in the summertime, and somewhere along the line, basketball and he connected, and the big problem was that he began to think that he had ability as a player, and what he ended up doing is he ended up coming to, I want to say coming to camp for the 3 boys week and working the 2 girls weeks, and from then on he de-escalated the power of the camp from that time on.
Was now
Like a stray dog, you couldn't get rid of him.
what was he a player in any sense of the imagination? Did he play high school ball around here or a college or anything like that?
I'm not sure he made what team he made at Winslow. He'd have to answer that specifics because I don't think I scouted the team that I saw him play on.
Well, eventually he got to, and we're gonna talk to him to see if he has any leftover Pine Tree t-shirts or some of those nice golf shirts that you used to put us counselors on. There he is, Phil St. Onge. Good to
There
have
you
here,
go.
Phil.
Whit, how are you?
Good, Phil.
Phil, they were just explaining to us how
Yeah, I
you became
heard, I
a
heard.
fixture. You did. Okay. Do you have any response to that about you? Well, let's start with your game.
Well, I think, well, that'll be a short conversation, but I think my association with Whit and Dick Meader came about. My father wanted me to get out of the house. So he talked Whit into letting me go to camp for the whole summer at Thomas one time. And back then, Whit, it was before the days when Whit had, 77 counselors for each camper, with undefined jobs. We had very few counselors over at Thomas back in the 70s. It was a lot of fun. And, then from there, I went on to be a counselor, and then a coach, and then a commissioner. And then I had one of those kind of undefined jobs, overseeing the overseers. I don't remember what that was exactly, but I even did Swish's job for a couple of weeks, signing the referees. So and then, of course, finally, when I got out of coaching, I ran the store for Whit and changed that into a money making operation instead of a hand out free stuff to the counselors and campers operation. So worked pretty well, and of course the relationship with Dick has been tremendous over the years.
Well, you were one of my first coaches, Phil, when I was in 5th grade, and I
was thinking about that, and I think what happened is I had a really bad team, and they traded you on Sunday night or Monday morning, and all of a sudden you went from being on a very good team to not only having to play for me, but also being on a very bad team. And as I remember it, you handled it pretty well, to be honest with you, because I knew you were disappointed, but I do remember that. And of course, you were our best player, but we didn't have much to go with you.
Well, I still have a chip on my shoulder because I remember one of the other coaches, I overheard him saying to you, "Why'd you take him? You could have had one of my big kids." Basically telling you made a terrible GM move, and maybe you did.
No,
we didn't have a great week.
Made the
we had
right
a good
move.
time.
But TJ, I was never allowed to coach.
No,
because his father would always put the kibosh on that. I do have a funny story about TJ though, when he was at camper at Thomas, and I don't know if you even know this story, TJ, but I was a commissioner in a 4-team league, where we had 4 coaches, and we couldn't decide on the playmaker of the week. 2-2, 2-2, 2-2, 2-2. Couldn't break the tie. So finally I said, listen, TJ is going to come to camp for 1,000,000 weeks, and he's going to be fine. And he's a good kid. It's going to work out fine. Let's give it to the other kid, and I'll talk to Tommy and explain it to him. So I go to Tommy. And do I need to tell any more of the story, or should I finish? He pops a cork. Now, I'm probably 22, 23, maybe younger than that at the time.
and you thought you were doing the right thing.
I still think I was doing the right thing, but then I went to see Whit. I said, Jesus, Tommy just popped a cork on me. And he goes, what happened? I told him, I said, well, we decided to give the award to the other kid. And Whit just shakes his head. Don't you know? It's. But I think you could do a whole hour segment just on Tommy stories. I think.
Well,
He'll be one of the shows, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, that's great.
Yeah.
But Thomas was, really a different experience than Colby. I wouldn't say better or worse, but it was more intimate. We weren't spaced out as much. Logistically, and Whit was at his finest. I remember refereeing a girls' game. Whit was coaching with Dick Graves, one of his old friends from down in Massachusetts, and Eddie and I were reffing, and it was a semifinal game on Thursday night. You know how those were. And I still remember throwing up a jump ball back when they still had the jump ball, and before the. And I have to add that Whit was wearing a penny for some reason. Do you remember that, Whit?
I remember a lot of things, Phil.
Yeah. and I get ready to throw the ball up. And before I throw the ball up, I look at the scorer and I say, "How much time left?" And he just goes, "Don't worry about the time. Just throw the damn ball up." You know, in his cheerful sense. But
Yeah.
and Meader, they always screwed Meader at camp because every week, either Whit had the best team or Brendan had the best team. But one thing was guaranteed: Meader was going to have the worst team. He
true.
always, but he had the worst players. I don't think he ever won a championship. But it was
Yes,
Brendan's
we did
week.
one year. Dave Fountain from Winslow was on that team.
That's
still
before,
remember.
that's before even me.
Yeah.
Dave was a senior. Dave was a senior when I was a freshman, I believe, maybe 8th grade.
Yeah.
So that's a long way back.
And another
But,
good player from Prescott was on the team.
Yeah. No, of course we all ate at once at Thomas, pretty much.
Right.
And I still remember Whit leading kind of a conga line through the cafeteria, singing. I think is it Elvira or Elmira? I can't.
Yeah.
remember.
Elvira.
I heard that
remember that,
song
Dick?
the other day riding and made me think of camp and Whit group.
He led a conga line, and Eddie and I and the awards. Now remember, you know, Jason and TJ, you know, when you were working at camp, the awards were, you know, quick and get them out of there as fast as they could. At Pine Tree, at Thomas, they went on for hours because, you know,
Really?
Whit can talk. Eddie and I used to keep track of how many times Whit would say during the course of a week. And we fill up a tally sheet on that because it would, and of course we just want to get paid and start drinking. And you know, we just, I guess another story about Thomas is the time that Dick Meader says, because Dick did all the dirty work, you know, the setting up the camp, the hauling of the beds and all that stuff. And he asked Steve Clifford and I if we would stay after camp on Friday to help put the baskets away. They used to go out to Anisetti's camp, Anisetti's garage. And, you know, how do you say no to Dick Meader, right? So we said, okay, yeah, we will. So we make one trip. And Dick says, well, let's just do one more trip. All right, Dick. So one more trip. And then he says, well, how about if we do one more trip, we'll be over halfway done. Okay, all right, we'll go, Dick. That's fine. And then we came back and he says, wow, geez, we're almost done. We might as well finish up. So we spent the whole, you know, hours loading those damn baskets. And if you guys know me at all, there are very few things I despise more than manual labor. So that was quite a. So
And
you
that
had
was-
the NBA.
That's you and
the
Cliff.
NBA guy loading baskets. Yeah, you had the NBA guy loading baskets.
Perfect.
Jeez. Yeah.
Perfect.
But Thomas was fantastic. It was what a great learning experience, and you know, the people that we met, and you know, back then, I mean, that was the only camp. So you had,
Right.
you know, Brownie hadn't started Swish camp, so you know, you had Brendan, you know, Art Dyer, you know, it was just loaded with the Tommy Maines, obviously, you know, Whit, Meader. It was crazy, and every game was like, you know, I remember, you know, Tony. What was Tony's name? Whit from
Tony Cannavale.
Cannavale.
Oh,
Tony and Tommy
from Pinkerton?
Maines almost having a fist fight during the game, and Whit had to kind of, you know, waddle over the, you know, kind of proximity, you know, problem.
Those were the days where you coached the team and you ref the game before you. And
Yep.
the game
Oh, really?
afterwards
Yeah.
and-
You didn't have refs.
And the drill
No.
stations.
No,
He did
triple
everything.
doubles. Eddie Whit used to come by and go, Eddie, do you have a triple double today? You know, because that's where you did stations, you refed, and you coached the team. And yeah, it was crazy. it was just crazy. And then of course we all lived in the same dorm. There's only one dorm there. So Whit would be down there, stuffing his face with steak bombs and, and playing cards, smoking cigars. And, all of a sudden I'd get, Phil, get the list. And he'd be out looking up into the fourth floor, third floor, whatever it was, and screaming and hollering, quiet down up there. Get the list, Phil, get the list. I want to know who's in 3B. Of course, there's no list,
Yeah, that's the. Well, that kind of segues into one of the things that indelible on my mind at Thomas and it carried over at Colby, but a kid would pull a fire alarm.
Oh yeah.
And Coach Whitmore, everybody be sitting around and we'd be on the court and he'd walk around in a small circle and tell us about this special powder that was on your hands. And that right now they have the Waterville PD is circling and they're going to know what room you were in. So if it's not your room, but you know who did it, you better come tell us before the police do.
And you're gonna be at the bus station and your coach is gonna have to come pick you up.
It's gonna be in the newspaper, in your hometown newspaper. We're gonna make sure of it.
I'll tell you. So he did one of those speeches, and then we had drill stations out back, and I was doing a drill station, and Bob Hebert was running my stations. And this poor kid, he just looked like he was going to puke, and he just looked awful. He's all pale, and he wasn't that type of kid, right? So I said to Bob, I said, "Geez, we ought to get him to the trainer." Of course, you don't want to send him to Poozall because, geez, that could kill him himself. But anyway, Bob says, "I think that's the kid that pulled the fire alarm." He looked so scared to death of Whit.
Coach Whit, I don't know if you remember this, but that story reminds me of the only year I was at Thomas. It would have been 1983. And you remember Moray Sullivan?
Maury, yeah.
So Moray Sullivan was from Hawaii. He was a cousin of a Waterville kid, and he used to come every summer. Yeah, he had a congenital deformity with his neck, but he loved playing basketball. He was pretty good, and he was, I think, one of Coach Whit's favorite kids. He'd come every summer, and he had money stolen from him at the beginning of the week. This was at Thomas, and Coach Whitmore was so pissed off. And he used his detective technique. He'd come before the whole assembly, and he started out by saying, "We have it narrowed down to 2 buildings." And then he'd come the next day and say, "We have it narrowed down to the building. We're taking fingerprints, and we're getting." And then he had it narrowed down to the wing. And then one time he came and he said, "I hope whoever stole that money uses it to buy a cup of coffee, and they drink it, and it's poison, and they die." And we're all going, "Oh my God." So sure enough, it wasn't long. Kid on my team, Matt Sylvester, who was a little 5th grade kid, and I'll never forget it. He ended up confessing he was scared to death. What just about had him on a clothesline. Oh, it was great. Do you remember that, Coach?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What's
Matt Sylvester doing? I hope that was his last foray of thievery.
If it's not, he's going to hear this podcast. Like, you just called me a thief.
He's going to look at your office, Jason. He's going to sue you.
That's it. We'll see what kind of lawyer you are.
It's a defense to defamation. So.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's funny. All the counselors and coaches would be outside when there was a lecture going on, but when they would hear that something had been stolen,
oh, geez.
Go after them. Everybody was in the gym. Yeah, look.
Yeah. Can you give any other specific examples or stories of the disciplinary type situations you guys had to deal with all those kids?
I remember one time somebody did something in the door. One of my jobs was to bring Dickie, Kevin, and Mary Beth home at the end of the night. And I could still picture it, clear as day. Somebody bothered his card game, essentially, is what happened. And so he had to go to a dorm room. He was pissed off. And I still remember those kids tearing around the corner, Dickie first, then Kevin, and then Mary Beth last tailing, and she says, "Come on, Phil, let's go." Because they didn't want to be around Mount, Vesuvius that blew up, Oh God. Geez, you brought up kind of the lecture thing, Dick Meader, and boy, think back to the lectures that we had.
Wow, this might be a good segue.
you know, which favorite, Patino, who was a bum, but a great lecturer.
Well, hold on, but
Hold on.
before you go any further, you know, this is a good little segue. I want to come back to some of the disciplinary issues because I want to
Okay.
I want to
yeah,
hear
my bad.
from Coach Witt and Coach Meader. But we'll come back to that. But since we're talking about speakers, we have captured some original audio from some of the early speeches. So I want to just play a little game with all you, and we're going to play a little clip. Now, it may be hard to hear because these are old tapes that were taken by Rusty Atwood, but preserved. And
That's a shocker.
And I'm going to play, and I want you to see if you can identify the speaker. Okay.
Okay.
Here's the
Is there a
first.
prize, Jason? Is there a prize?
Yeah, you get an attaboy from
Oh,
TJ.
Jesus. Oh, Jesus.
That any sport that doesn't, they take some sport that he doesn't, he later to do it. Ball player, and over the screen, name was seven. He's back. Or you should have a back. What's the pocket? But Chevy used the bat with the right foot, put it back here. Does that make it right for you? No. It was Yankee off with
Any
Is that
guesses?
Buster?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Buster Sheary.
Well, that's way back.
June 1976.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's before
June
my time.
1976. All right, here's another one. This is one of the more famous speakers that you have.
the right direction, and then also get the objectives of the drill. Number one, what we're trying to do is learn basketball. It's learning to control basketball. We want to make sure we have completely under control all the time.
Talking ball control. Any guesses?
Tino?
Famous offensive system coach.
Yeah. Mastermind offensive coach.
The strong take from the weak take from the strong.
Yeah. Princeton.
Oh,
The
Pete
guy-
Carrill?
Yeah.
No, we do have Pete Carrill, but that's Dick Meader.
Switched it up.
All right, hold on. We're not done. We got some other good, just a little taste of what we had. By the way, we do have a Pete Carrill tape, but he doesn't speak loud enough, so you can't hear it.
The Lorax.
All right, here's the next one.
What's going on? So, we ask you fellas, did you think of any problems that they figure out?
Tough to hear. Any guesses?
Yeah, I couldn't hear it.
Delphi University. Mark.
Oh,
Oh,
Kessler.
Marv Kessler. Marv Kessler used to start his lectures out with, he'd make everybody stand up. Everybody stand
Raise
up.
your right
repeat
hand.
after me. Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Yeah.
I promise not to tell my parents that I said fuck during this lecture.
Yeah.
And Dick Meader would just be cringing.
All right, we got a
I
couple.
enjoyed that.
He was one of my favorite guys ever.
Oh, he
I
was
heard
awesome.
that.
Yeah, you're gonna be able to get this one.
But more important on the game of life. Because ultimately, the biggest game we all will play will be the game of life. And this camp today, many like people have a great reputation, who have tremendous pride about what they do here, who believe in the great
Valvano.
Is that
Valvano.
Do you
No,
remember Dick?
No?
not
I thought it was
Valvano.
Valvano.
Togo?
Oh, it isn't?
No,
No.
I think this
Who's-
is the one that
who's-
Lance told him to shut up as you were trying to pick him up from the airport because he wouldn't stop talking.
Oh,
The face of college basketball.
Dick Vitale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that true that happened? Tell me.
Well, it was, he was scheduled to come up and he was just named, new general manager for the Detroit team was named and he thought he should be there, Vitale, because he had just been hired as the head coach. So we switched his time, and so we'd gone about 6 straight weeks, and I said, well, we'll go down and pick him up, Betty and I, and the boys were a year and a half and 3 years perhaps, station wagon, and he just talked all the time. And one of the kids said to me, because she kept telling him to be quiet. She was in the back seat in his station wagon and said, "Who's that guy think he is?" or something like that. Vitale.
Some things never change, right?
Right?
Yep.
All right, so
Wow.
here-
Well,
go ahead.
No, go
remember,
ahead.
TJ, we saw him in the restaurant last year in
2 years ago
2 years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
2 years ago. No. Yeah.
in Minneapolis. Yeah.
Dick Vitale, that was August 6th, 1978.
Yep.
So here's one that was on Father's Day, June 19th, 1977. And I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but he's talking about how crazy he is to be up in Maine at this basketball camp on Father's Day, talking to these kids.
There's no shot. I'm out of my mind. I
Oh, that's
No,
no
wow.
fun.
I am absolutely nuts. I'm strange. I'm weird. Okay? Think of Jay's Father's Day. I should be home tickling my wife and hugging my kids, right? And I'm up in Waterville, Maine. You know what I'm talking about? You gotta be crazy to do this.
Jason,
Can you hear that?
Jason.
Because I'm nuts. I'm up here in Waterville, Maine. It's great.
hey, Jason,
Yeah.
I was a camper that week, and Dick Meader and Dick Whitmore will confirm this. He comes down those stairs with a skateboard, and he's got something covered up on the skateboard. He pulls the skateboard, and he gives his lecture, and he pulls the skateboard up. It was a rat. And he says, "You've got to be a rat," and this and that. And he left the T-shirt for Whit to give to the rat of the week. And do you remember who it was, Whit? Because I do. Who got that award?
No.
Kevin Withey.
Oh, I do not. That's right. Yeah.
Kevin Withey. It was a guy who played the hardest, all that type of thing. But that was of all the lectures that I heard, I would say that was the best one that I ever heard. And the other one that sticks out in my mind was Brendan used to do a thing on Friday called Potpourri. You remember that, Whit?
Yep.
And he-
Now, Coach Witt, one of the other tapes I had that I'm not going to play is Coach Patino. We have a couple tapes of him too. Now, there's a pine tree legend that a lot of our listeners in the mailbag have asked for you to confirm or deny that you excused him from any further responsibilities to speak one week because he was and demonstrated some level of arrogance that you didn't appreciate. Maybe you can.
Well, I think the fact that there are a lot of different facts that are misconstrued to some extent involved with that story. But it was a morning afternoon lecture. I think he did a lecture in the morning, then in the afternoon. Am I right, Dick?
I'm sorry, I missed
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Uh,
that is accurate.
He did a morning lecture, and then
Yes,
he was
yes.
to do an afternoon lecture.
Right.
And then we said that we were not going to have a lecture in the afternoon, I think is how I put it.
Yeah.
And so how'd that come about? The
Oh,
listeners want to know. They just.
Well,
He won't give you the story,
it
but I
was
will.
it was a difficult situation because you get to a point where you have to protect your own people, and that's essentially what we did in that instance. So
He politely excused him from further responsibilities.
at that point,
He did some embarrassing. He was embarrassing some staff members that he used to demonstrate. We will leave the staff members out of it, right, Whit?
yep.
What did Patino do? Would he throw the ball at somebody's head, Tom Maine style, or?
No, it wasn't. It was verbal.
It was
He denigrated
Gene DiLorenzo.
No names.
I mean, no names. That's what we're here for. We're here to tell the stories, not to
Coach was clear. No names.
These are rumors that we're trying to.
Even I didn't say any names. Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
But
Captain-
he embarrassed.
we're
He
not.
embarrassed him. He embarrassed him pretty good. And Whit, if you know anything about Whit and Meader, they're the most loyal people in the world.
Yeah.
And if I don't think Whit, Patino wasn't a big name back then, but I don't care who it was. They weren't going to allow that to happen, and they didn't.
Now,
And then-
Coach Beater.
Was Swish involved in that situation?
Swish was hiding at that time.
Exactly.
He's probably, that was his
You
hiding
said
time
it too.
during lectures.
Now,
Hey,
go ahead, Phil.
go ahead. Well, I just got another story. Well, Swish comes up over at Thomas. You know, the two, TJ, they still have at the end of the gym, 2 doors
Yep.
at the end. Okay.
Yep.
So, playoff game, you guys know Tommy Farrell is, right?
Yep.
And Tommy had an explosive, nicest guy in the world. He had an explosive temper. And so Swisher's reffing a playoff game. And Tommy had Eddie Moss on his team. Eddie Moss was a guy that played at Power and went to Syracuse with Brendan and eventually became the mayor of Syracuse, believe it or not. But Eddie gets fouled driving to the basket, and then the guy goes in, and Swisher decides he's going to be, because Swisher's always joking around, right? He decides he's going to run out the door and in the other door, during the game while he's reffing. And Farrell lost his mind, just lost his mind, because Eddie, of course, fouled the guy at the other end. So he missed the foul at one end. He calls a foul at the other end, and Farrell loses his mind. If you've ever seen Farrell lose his mind, it's well worth watching. Would you agree with that, Whit?
Yes, Phil, I was there.
Yeah. Did I describe that? Did I describe that accurately?
Well, at this point in time, accuracy is kind of in the second line of
Priority.
what's happening.
Now, how about Coach Meader, Coach Witt, and Phil even best lecturers
Phil
you
even.
heard? Well, the audience really wants to hear from our 2 main characters, but they'll listen to you. They'll tolerate you. What is the best speakers that you had come to camp that were memorable? You must have had hundreds of speakers.
From my own mind, I don't think anybody touched Belvano. Nobody.
Not even close.
He was at a different level, and he was an entertainer, and he was a teacher, and he was absolutely, at least portraying how much he liked. He liked being there, and he, as far as drawing attention, he was fantastic.
Yep.
And I don't know. I thought
Huey Brown.
Yeah, Hubie Brown was unbelievable because he was, basketball wise, nobody knew anything any more than that. But
Did Jim Valvano coach? Did he come up to coach too, or did he just come up to speak?
No,
speak.
yeah.
Just to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he hang out at all, or did he just?
But the first speaker that we had the first year was Dave Collins.
Well,
remember that, Dick?
Yeah.
How much did that cost you back then?
How much did that cost? I don't know, $150.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, you had People's Express for a number of them, and Brendan's connection to Five Star was able to get.
Oh yeah.
Good speakers.
Yeah.
How was Dave Collins?
Yeah, he was a demonstrator more than a clinician. He had a guy named Larry Petty was there that year.
Oh,
and he was
yeah.
6'9" guy that ended up going to Wisconsin, and he ended up playing in one-on-one as part of the lecture, and it was absolutely unbelievable to watch. To watch a guy at that level. Collins at a guy at that level, and he remembers it still.
Interesting.
Kessler was fantastic.
Yeah, he was my favorite I ever listened to.
He was so good.
Yeah. Well, even though I can still tell the story, like I can word for word do Coach Vachon's speech. His was always great. Like I always enjoy listening to Coach Vachon give his varsity speech.
Yep. And but there was, because Krzyzewski was there.
No kidding.
Yeah. That was when he was still at Army, Dick, right?
Yes, it was up to Kobe.
Yep.
Yeah, he had not gone to Duke yet.
Yeah.
Now, how about Togo? He's got to hold a special place.
He's,
Yeah.
When you talk about somebody
And he,
being, connecting with the kids and being able to get kids to at least listen for that particular period of time, he was amongst the best. And when you talk about loyalty, there's a guy that was first class in that regard too.
I believe he came because of taking Buster Sherry's place one day.
Right. Yep.
And that was one of his first lectures he ever did, I think.
Now, speaking of getting kids to pay attention at any particular time, I've always been amazed at Coach Witt's ability to get 400, 500 kids to sit quiet while he's explaining how to tie a key in your shoelace. And which leads me to wonder about mail call. One of the more embarrassing moments of my childhood was when I got called down for mail call. Can you tell me the origins of that?
Well, that was back at a time when, there were filling moments that you had to have. And, at Thomas, there was only a certain amount of space that you had to be able to do stations and games, etc. And so you had to really be careful. So we ended up using the mail call as an afternoon filler. And it became, it worked out that the first couple of times we did it, two kids were, totally embarrassed. And, one of them had really had a letter from his girlfriend. And I made sure that the other one felt that he had received one letter from his girlfriend. And that just was a lot of fun.
How did you choose your victims with it?
It differentiated, we'd be able, once you saw the envelope, you'd be able to build the story around that.
I still remember the poem whip. He gets a kid and he says, there's a poem on this, and the eyes are rolling and the arms are moving. And he says, since you've been gone, life's been no fun. Can't wait till you get home so we can go one-on-one. And the place erupted.
It always did. It always did.
I'll never forget that. I was a camper then. I do believe that Witt, chose his victims. This guy was a good sport. He chose people that he knew. He wasn't out to. He knew what he was doing. He always does.
Well, when I was about third grade at Thomas, my sisters put lipstick all over the outside of an envelope, and coach is showing it, and everybody's going, woo. So everybody's expecting, the senior, junior, senior, like TJ Maine's come on out. And I was the smallest kid by a mile, the youngest one there to come out.
Probably the widest, though.
Probably the one,
widest.
definitely the widest neck.
Yeah, talking about flushing the toilets and everything else.
Yeah.
Any other stories or anecdotes about some of the other funny disciplinary issues or anything else that you dealt with, either at Thomas or Colby, that comes to mind? Coaches, counselors, or players?
Dick, do you remember when we played 2-on-2 against the All-Americans from
I thought of it earlier when they were discussing your ability, Phil, and I wanted to speak up for you that I thought you played very well.
So
All-Americans.
So this is when girls basketball was, just starting to crank up, and of course, Witt and Meader saw that as a money-making opportunity. So Pine Tree Girls Camp became, and the summer that I was there, I was sophomore in high school, and Witt decides he's going to have an exhibition between the two All-Americans from Penn State, Marnie Dacko, and I don't remember
Marnie Dacko,
and Dick Meader and I. Now,
Jen Christensen, I think was her name. The other one, Jen Christensen.
One good thing about getting older is that each year there are less and less people that remember me playing. But I think it's safe to say that I was not a very good player. And just to kind of give you how the difference between girls and boys basketball, we killed them. We really did. And Meader scored most of the points, if not all the points. But we beat them handily. And Dick was starting his trend towards obesity. But he was old. How old were you, Dick? 35, 36 probably back then?
Oh, less than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I was never good. And we beat him. And we beat him handily. Of course, so then Whit decides to have another game. And, of course, he made sure the girls won because he had the whistle. But we beat him handily. That was a highlight of my playing career, I think, perhaps.
Who was Whit? I remember Whit at Colby playing, and you must have been 55 playing the guy who ran facilities, playing his son.
Oh, Eric Stockford.
Yeah, Stockford.
Oh, that was great.
that was one of the highlights of Pine Tree.
If only we had video cameras and iPhones back then, where we could film all that stuff. I would give anything.
I don't think that would have been done if you had that stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah, I could still, oh boy, that was great. Because there was some sort of bet that went along with that.
Yes.
Hey, who was the guy on your team from Christ the King that you were on one of your bad weeks where you had a bad team, so you must have won the championship the week before, and you had the big guy that he thought.
Big Al.
Big Al.
Big Al. He wanted to go out with Mary Beth, and you didn't think that was a great idea. And then they get in the huddle. Whit calls a timeout. They get beat and something, and he just looks at Whit. He goes, "What the fuck, Whit?" Can you imagine saying that to him back here?
No.
Big Al, he was a little crazy.
He was.
Yeah. So Coach Whit, how long did you coach for before you just started with your just running the camp?
Oh, probably at least the first 6-7 years, Dick.
Yeah, all of that.
Both of you guys did?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say, Coach, you coached me my last year, summer of 1990. You and Kevin.
Yeah,
you were around for some of it.
They coached me too. We were undefeated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was good in a lot of different ways because it connected you directly to the campers, and especially in the girls' weeks, it was great. I think it had an impact in its own way, and then it just became, the camp just became too big after a while.
Yeah.
Now we talked about some of the male lecturers. Did you have any good female lecturers that came and talked to the girls' camp that stuck out in your mind?
Nancy Lieberman came.
Yeah. She good?
She's one of the all-time greats.
No, I mean as a speaker.
Oh.
She was okay.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yeah.
Out of New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
Oh yeah.
Kathy Coakley.
Kathy Coakley. Yeah.
Was one. I'm trying to think the one.
Who was the best? Who were the best female players that you had at the camp that you recall?
Joanne Palumbo. Macaulay. Rita.
Brenda Beckwith was a good player.
Rita was really a good player.
Yeah, Rita.
Rita, Tom Maine's wife. That's how I know her.
Rita Maines.
She had a legitimate boys basketball, a jump shot.
And Brenda. Give me the last name, Dick, from Fairfield. Brenda
Beckwith.
Yeah,
she was before her time. She was an exceptional player.
Yeah. Now, how about on the boys?
And we had Cindy when from the time she was 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie Bradstreet. I mean, from the time she was 8 years old. I mean, they were, they went a long, long time.
Yeah.
Rachel Bouchard, did she come to camp?
Yeah.
I remember her work. I remember her working. Yeah.
She was a counselor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how about on the boys' side of it? Who are some of the great? I know, like Chris Mullen must be probably the best player, most successful that you ever had come through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the best players you saw play?
Who's the best players you saw play, regardless of what they turned into later?
Eddie Moss was at a different level.
Yeah.
Where is he from?
He was from Power.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Syracuse.
Oh, you talked about him earlier.
He's the one who became mayor.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he was so quick that it was, it was amazing what he was able to do. And he was so good that Swisher used to stay in the gym to watch his games if he wasn't referee. So
That
Wow.
says something.
yep.
How about the Jason Williams was a great player, I remember.
Yeah, he was. Yep.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember Chris Mullen when he was there? Did he stick out as a phenom, or was?
Yeah, well, it was between his sophomore and junior year, Dick, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Eddie McGlone coached him, and I think it was
Yep.
8th grade year, it might have been.
Yeah. Yeah, he was just, again, when you see guys at a different level. Who was the guy with one arm?
Oh,
Yes.
Norris something.
Norris McAdoo.
Morris McAdoo,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't ask me where I found
Yeah,
that.
that's
But I remember that.
That's the same time. There was a
Yeah,
kid, Stevie Nicholson, like that.
Yeah.
He was quick and guard, and
Yeah.
Yep. He was from Catholic Memorial.
yeah.
Mario Ellie was there
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
for a couple of years.
Yeah, he was good. He was a good player.
Although my father says all the time that Dickie Whitmore was as good as any player who's ever played there. And he was a freshman or sophomore.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was good.
Yeah, I think he was a freshman or sophomore, and he and Norris McAdoo were in the one-on-one final.
No kidding.
Who
I
won?
think they were co-MVPs with.
Yeah, that's right, Dick.
Who won?
Uh,
You may have to get Dick on to talk about it. We're going to have some other guests on. We'll try to do it at the same time next week if it's okay with you.
Okay.
Have fun.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Coach. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.